Is your girlfriend or wife a narcissist? Well, I have a checklist for you, and this is a part two of a couple of a part series. We'll see what we can get done today. But this video is going to help you determine if you are in that situation with your girlfriend or wife. If she's actually possibly having a diagnosable disorder, and if that's possibly something that you're trapped in that you need to get out of. So we'll dive deep into it in a few minutes. Hello, hello. I'm going to fit in this stream here while I'm in between consults with clients who are solving a lot of problems in their lives and doing pretty well. So it's a good day, but I want to just come on here and kind of give you a continuation of last week's pod class on narcissism, covert narcissism specifically. And make sure you are subscribed and that notification bell is hit. Everybody says that for YouTube. I get that. But as I've mentioned before, YouTube is about the fifth thing I do. I put out very valuable information here that is going to save your life. And it's stuff that is actionable. It's not a bunch of entertainment garbage. It's stuff that's really going to help you. But I'm not a YouTuber. So, I'm not sitting here building the channel with scheduled stuff all the time. I fit it in between real clients with real problems and my communities and my coaching communities and all that stuff that I deal with behind a paywall. So I jump on here to give you guys free information that's valuable, and if you want questions answered, it helps you to get on live. But for you to see that, you probably have to be subscribed, and you probably have to get notified. All right, with a notification bell, and that is just it. So do that. Help me out too. It'll help, because I know you guys want to be here. You want the information, and it helps me spread the channel and spread the good word out there, right? And all this stuff. And so I like this comment to start off. If she left you and she smears you on social media after that, she's a narcissist. Well, maybe not diagnosable, but that's certainly narcissistic behavior, right? Running a smear campaign. That's something we will talk about. It's a lot of times too, girls won't necessarily smear you on social media, but what they will do is they will smear you to close people. They'll smear you to people that you're close to, which is almost, I would say that's actually worse. You know what I mean? Because they will get others to pact against you, and that's a real big issue, and that can really harm men, because in these relationships and these breakups, men really do get harmed by that, because the social narrative is that you're already bad anyway because you're a guy, right? So if you have any masculinity, that's already something bad that needs to be controlled. That's the social narrative. It just is what it is. You know what I mean? And then so with breakups, people tend to side with the woman, and it's not all the time. I know there's stories where narcissistic men like smear the girl and she's got this, her reputation destroyed. I realize that does happen. But on a scale of probability, I'd say it probably happens more often to the guy. And it's not even if she's a diagnosable narcissist, a lot of times it just happens because the girl wants to build social alliances. Her reputation is something she's more thinking about. That's something women think about. They want that. They're more sensitive to the social input, and social proof. And so a guy tends to not care as much usually. And because of the way that women are wired socially, they're better. Women are better than men are usually at building social alliances and friendships and friend circles and stuff like that. And so they will, with a bad breakup, especially if it's a divorce, especially if there's a lot of mutual friends, all your friends have merged together, and if you're a guy in the scenario, it's pretty common that she's going to, if she's a divisive person, whether she's narcissistic or whether she's just in a place of being divisive with a breakup for whatever reason. Like, you could have done some bad things to her. That could be why, right? But she'll often smear you to your social groups and try to make you look bad so she can make herself look better. And it works. Unfortunately, it can work. She does it because it works. All right. So a lot of people are victims of that, but I don't want to get too derailed because I don't have. It's going to be a very short show just due to the time that I have with consults this week. But I wanted to just kind of continue to build on our conversation last week. There'll be another part, I'm sure, from this. All right. But if you got questions, do a super chat or whatever, because then I'll see it and I'll address it. T Diamond right here with the super chat. Thank you so much. If sex is something that is meant to be shared between man and woman, why don't men and women share the consequences of sex? Well, what I guess I'm going to ask for some clarification. You don't need to super chat the clarification, but just to tell me, what do you mean by the consequences of sex? Do you mean share in taking care of a child? Is that what you mean? Because it does seem like family law and state law forces a guy to take care of a child, whether he wants to or not, right? And that's a complicated issue because it's her body, her choice. But if she chooses to have the child, then the guy has to pay for it, right? And so that's just the way it is, right? And so I'm not sure. You say the consequences of sex and sharing in it. It seems like men are sharing in those consequences, or at least being forced to by the law. I'm not saying making a judgment on that. It is what it is. I have my feelings on that are, if the woman can choose to have the baby or not have the baby independently of the guy's opinion, then she should have the consequences of that choice. Sex does not directly mean having a baby, considering that there's protection you can have, there's all kinds of measures you can have, right, to not have a baby. Okay, sex is not directly meaning baby. All right, so you have a lot of scenarios where women get pregnant intentionally, or they say that they're on protection and they're not, or they just they're trying to get the guy to be, they know that if they throw their vagina at the guy, he's going to say yes or whatever, and then they get pregnant and now they have this permanent attachment to this guy, and that's a financial thing too. So I mean, there's a lot of women out there not that use the sort of pregnancy thing against men. That happens, right? And now there's also guys too that just abandon their kids and don't take care of them and all that. So I mean, we got problems out there, but I guess I'm not sure. So for clarification, I can't make a man love his own kid, and men don't want to hear a promiscuous woman want to settle down when she's ready. And men don't want to hear a promiscuous. I'm sorry, I'm trying to. But yeah, okay, so like, yeah, you can't, right? Which is why, listen, if it's your body and it's your choice, then you have to be select. I mean, the woman's job is part of our humanness. Okay, the woman's job is to be selective. All right, on whose penis she puts inside of herself. You have to be. You're welcome. You're welcome. You have to be selective over who you're putting inside of you, right? Like, that's got to be your job. And promiscuous women indicate a less selectivity, which is why it's seen as less value. But you can't change that. That's an instinct. Guys want a girl to bang them, but they don't want them banging everybody else. I mean, that's just the mammalian brain. There's not really a lot of logic to that. It just is what it is. But your job as a girl, okay, as a woman, is to not is in the sexual marketplace is to be selective about who you are choosing to mate with. And you could end up with a dude who doesn't care about his kid and tries to abandon you and forces you to try to chase after him using family law. And that's just as much your fault in a way as a girl. If I get with a girl who deceives me and takes all my crap, I'm somewhat to blame for that. Yes, I might be being victimized or whatever, but that I chose her, I picked her, I put her in the position to harm me. So I made mistakes there, right? And yes, women are victims of men who, lie and, present themselves in one way and they're really not that way and they get deceived, right? And the next thing you know, they're sitting there with the baby and no father around. And that happens and that sucks. And I'm not victim blaming, but she's not a victim though. Okay, because she chose to have sex with that guy. She chose to get into it with that guy. And if she missed all the cues and the signs, some accountability belongs to her. Just like you guys who get screwed over by women, accountability belongs to you. Accountability is what empowers you to change things. All right. So it doesn't do you any good whether you're a man who was screwed over by a woman, or whether you're a woman who was screwed over by a guy. It doesn't do you any good for people to say, oh, that's too bad. You're the victim. That shouldn't have happened. That other person's a bad person. All those things could be true, but how does that empower you to change anything for your future? It doesn't. All that does is shift accountability. The best way to give somebody power is to make them accountable for their choices. So, okay, you picked the wrong guy, got pregnant with the wrong guy. What can you do now about that now? And what can you do about your future choices in men, right? What led you down the path of picking that wrong person? Guys who are victims of covert narcissist women, which is the topic of this video. What can you do to change that? And this is why I have this video out, so you can see the warning signs and start making better decisions for yourself, right? And so yeah, it's accountability helps. Help. T Diamond says accountability helped me a lot. It made me develop better foresight. Exactly. And that's what I'm here for. And whether, although this channel is generally, because I coach men, so the audience is generally men, but you're a woman and we have women on here too. And accountability is good for everybody. That's what gives you the power, you know what I mean, to change things in your life. So great question though. But back to the topic too, because I'm going to get to the end of my time before I get to it. But, there's a couple of things I want to clear up from last week, and we'll get to more of the checklist. So make sure you watch part 1 because I covered a lot there. But some people were interested in the difference between borderline personality disorder and covert narcissism, because they can come up, they kind of can show up as like a similar thing, right? And so let's look at that. I'm going to share my screen here. And I want to go over this with you. Let's go to slideshow. Okay, so I want you to take a look at this to give you some perspective, because I'm going to answer a couple of questions with this, all right? So this is the difference between, we're going to go over a difference between NPD and BPD. Now, covert narcissists, as I mentioned last week, aren't as grandiose or extroverted. They tend to play the victim, which is often what borderline personality disorder people do as well. So there's often a diagnosis of one or the other. They often get misdiagnosed as one or the other, or, BPD gets diagnosed as BPD when maybe it's NPD, vice versa. It doesn't really matter that much when it comes to treatment, and I'll get to that though. But here's the differences. And so NPD is really a disorder of the ego, okay? A disorder of that sense of self, that ego and who you are and your value, all right? And you want to look at personality disorders as a scale, okay? Which is why I mentioned last week, we're not here to diagnose anyone, because a professional has to look at, you don't just look at the 9 traits, for example, and then say, oh, this person fits this because I can make them fit. A lot of people will exhibit the traits in different circumstances. That doesn't mean that they are actually a disordered person. There's an overuse of the word narcissist, as well as an overuse of the word abuse. And somebody had a question about that in my comments, and I'll address that too. Okay. There's an overuse of these words, but particularly with narcissism and BPD, and that's thrown around in like the manosphere circles, like any girl with toxic traits is BPD now, which isn't really true, right? So there's differences. Now, you want to look at this on a spectrum. Okay. In other words, it's not like one or the other. There's a point where those 9 traits get so extreme that they're considered disordered. But some people exist here in the middle. So a lot of women or you're dealing with can exist around the insecure side of their egos. They're not disordered. They don't qualify as having the disorder because they're not extreme enough, but they do exhibit traits in certain circumstances, and they can be very toxic. So insecure women, and I say insecure meaning they're not secure in their ego. They don't really have a secure way of seeing their value and how their identity and value fits into the world. And so if they're not, they can still, the people who are insecure can have relationships where they bond with others. So they're not running them. And that's the difference. Like whether or not you reach this black line here into disordered or not, the way I look at it is, do they put people through an abuse cycle? If they can't help but put their romantic partners through an abuse cycle, that's how I would delineate disordered versus not. There are some people who are insecure in their egos. They have a lot of inner game issues, and that shows up as toxic traits and behaviors in relationships. But they still have a bond with another person. You know, their disorder is not standing in the way of the oxytocin that they should feel when they fall in love with somebody. All right. Their insecure tendencies and their toxic traits don't stand in the way of their emotions for somebody. All right. It just stands in the way maybe of having a healthy relationship. But the reason this is important to look at is because this insecure behavior in the middle here, which isn't quite diagnosable, these women and these people, okay, because you could be a guy having this too, right? These people can be helped and can work on things, all right, and often can do so more or less on their own with self-reflection and doing the right activities to self-improve. Maybe some coaching can help them as well, okay? Maybe some therapy can help them, of course, but they're able to help themselves a lot better. Someone who's disordered and in this other category where they can't bond with another person in a healthy way without their ego getting in the way and ruining that bond, like their oxytocin love towards someone is not an attachment in the same way that you or I attach. So all they can do is put somebody through what's called an abuse cycle. You know, their relationships with others is only predicated on how it feeds their ego, not on anything else. So like they can't attach and love somebody and feel that sense of missing someone or loss in the same way that you or I would. They have that attachment, but the attachment is based on their validating their ego. If that person is not validating their ego and constantly doing so in more and more extreme ways, then they discard that person. They no longer have feelings for them. So for a disordered person in who's NPD, it's all about ego validation. Okay, they have this bottomless ego and they constantly need it to be fed. They don't have a clear sense of self. They don't have a clear sense of their value. Not that, like, who does have a clear sense of that, right? A lot of people don't, but theirs is so corrupted though that they need constant behavior and validation and time and energy from other people in their lives. Then when you're in the disordered category, every relationship becomes a manipulation in order to get that validation or in order to get transactional things to happen for you. Like, oh, I'm going to be friends with this person because they'll let me borrow money in the future, or they're a good connection to have because they'll hire me for a job, or they'll give me this, or they'll invite me to the party, or they'll do that. Everything's a transaction with them when it comes to their casual relationships. And then when it comes to their close romantic or interpersonal relationships, it becomes a situation where they're getting supply from another person. So they're basically having to validate their ego at all times based on the person's behavior, and so if that's what you're dealing with, she's a narcissist. She's wanting all your attention, love, time, and energy constantly, but it's never going to be enough. And once you reach that peak of high emotions for her, the only place left to go is down. And so then when she's devaluing you and getting you to behave like someone you're not, getting you to struggle, getting you to get upset, to get angry, all of those things she's getting you to do is all validating her ego. And that's why she does it. And so she can't get out of that pattern and always needs to validate that ego. A secure person has a good sense of who they are, where they are in the world. They have good boundaries and standards for themselves, and they can communicate those in a healthy way. They don't have the sense of anxiety or fear if somebody crosses their boundaries. So a girl that's here can have healthy conversations. She is capable of having what I've talked about, those Luca conversations, right? Where you as the man listen, understand, seek clarity, and do an action plan. You're trying to empathetically understand her in when you're solving a problem. And she can participate in that conversation with you because she's not so fearful and insecure about her value and who she is. Somebody who's insecure about their value and who they are start bringing toxic traits and behaviors to the table when you try to solve a problem. But someone who is so, having some insecurity, but still having a sense of ego and self doesn't qualify as disorder. It just qualifies as having some psychological difficulty or trauma or trouble that they need to work on. Disordered means that they can't have a bond with you at all. So if you're with an NPD person, that's not a relationship in the way that you have a relationship with a normal person. You feel all the love and care for them, but they don't feel that for you in the same way. Their emotions for you, which can often be extreme, is predicated on your validation of her. Okay. And so it's all about supply. It's all about validating her. And that validation happens through negative energy and attention as well as positive. So keep that in mind. Every argument you have with an NPD person is actually fueling that ego. All right. And so that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with an NPD person. It's a disorder of the ego. And there's a scale here. Now, somebody asked in my comments, well, what if I have some of those traits? Can I get help or can I change them? Well, if you're asking that question, then the answer is yes, you can. Okay. It is treatable. Psychopathy and some of those other things is not really treatable, but NPD by itself, as long as they're not psychopathic, is treatable. It just depends on how far to the right of the scale they are. All right. If they're somewhere between disordered and insecure, okay, they're somewhere in between here or even just on low spectrum of disordered, that means they have an awareness that they're toxic. They have an awareness that they have this empty sense of self and ego, that their sense of who they are and their value is kind of empty, and they're constantly needing to validate that and constantly trying to, use their own value, give themselves validation. This is why they might act arrogant or this or that or the other, right? This disorder, they're insecure in their patterns. They have toxic patterns. They recognize it. And so then, yes, you can get help. And how is that? Well, you have to go to a good therapist and see that person on a regular basis. And the reason why is because so this is for anybody who thinks they have these things. The way that you think isn't right or correct. Your perception of the world is not objective enough. It is filtered through this disordered sense of self. And so you cure that by getting and learning to have a healthy sense of self and a healthy ego, independent of validation from others. And so when you can, and that's, I do that with guys in my coaching program. They're not necessarily narcissists, but they might have insecure sense of themselves. and therefore they have some toxic things they've done in their relationships. And we make better men here at Apex Mindset. We get rid of these insecure tendencies that cause these bad patterns of behavior. But I can do that with a guy if he's, not so far on the spectrum. If he is too far down on the spectrum, it's going to be really expensive to work with me because I'm using a coaching platform and not therapy, which therapy means that you're constantly in analysis, every single week with somebody. You know what I mean? And that's you need somebody to check your behavior and your beliefs and what you're experiencing on a regular basis, weekly, at least once a week, maybe a couple times a week, in order to change these patterns of thinking and get a better, deeper sense of self. My Alpha Mindset course can give you tools to do that. So go purchase that course. It's not that expensive and it'll help you. If you're anywhere in the spectrum, but a NPD person who needs treatment needs to see a therapist. Okay, they can't just do my course because you need that accountability and that feedback from another person. And they can't be a sucky therapist either. They got to be good. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's talk about, so that answers the question about, okay, what to do if it's you. If you're asking that question, you're probably not disordered completely. You're probably somebody who can be helped. You probably are just you're probably not even in the NPD category. Even if someone diagnosed you, you're probably not really there. And I say that because if you can recognize the pattern and the problem, that means you can start taking the measures to fix it. Most people with NPD are so far gone on the scale, their sense of self is so far gone that they cannot see the problem. And no matter how you explain it, no matter how you show it to them, no matter what you do, that light bulb will not go on. They will ego protect this ego that they, and so, it's just, they will at all cost protect the illusion and the image they're trying to present to the world. Because that's what it is. They don't have a clear sense of self. So they're trying to present this image or illusion out into the world. And their delusional behavior, their narcissistic delusions, they're different things. They're, imagining doing great things and putting themselves at the center of the universe and all that kind of stuff. That's all delusional behavior because they don't have a sense of themselves. All right. And so a person who's too far to the right of the spectrum will not be able to be helped because they won't see the problem. If you're asking that question, that means you're not too far to the right, but you're going to need to go get therapy. All right. And that's the thing. And it's got to be a qualified, good person. I know that can be hard to find. So, don't be afraid to try many different people till you find the right one. Okay. So now let's go into borderline personality disorder. Borderline is a disorder of attachment is the best way that I can look at it. And this is just a way I look at it and a way to sort of help you compartmentalize it. It's a fear of abandonment. And it's a disorder in the way that they see themselves with other people and their attachments with others. So it's not, and because they can't see themselves clearly with their attachments, so their relationships, their friendships, how they exist in the world with others, they're unclear because they're perpetually fearful of abandonment. They're perpetually fearful of people losing people. They're afraid of letting people go. BPD women will hold on to exes forever, for example. They're afraid of letting people go because they don't have a healthy attachment. They don't understand how their attachment fits in, that they don't see their own so they tend to see themselves as empty and not having a lot of value because they can't see how others would want to be with them and value them and attach to them in a natural way is the best way to describe it. So it's not so much focused on who they are. It's focused on who they are in relationship with. Okay. So that's the big focus on BPD. This is why BPD feel like they're being victimized by everyone around them that they're in relationship with, because they're perpetually fearful of abandonment or being rejected or being backstabbed or being betrayed. They're perpetually, and betrayal is a form of abandonment. And so abandonment seems to be the ongoing theme with borderline personality disordered people. And they see themselves as less value and as victims because they only can see this this possibility of abandonment or rejection or betrayal from others. So every relationship they have, they're looking at the possibility of being betrayed, abandoned, or rejected. And it's so hypersensitive that they get resentful and they oscillate between, hey, please don't leave me, I love you, and don't go, to, I hate you, you're a piece of crap because you're going to reject me, leave me, whatever. And they put it, you see this splitting behavior, this oscillating between those two with borderlines. It's this a little different than narcissist and covert narcissist. So you have secure people with secure attachments. Okay. Then you have insecure attachments where some of these toxic behaviors will show up in relationships. An insecure attachment, somebody who's, either, different types of, whether it's a mixture of being avoidant or not, it's being insecure in that attachment is going to cause toxic things. It's going to cause abandonment fears. It's going to cause being, blaming and accusing of cheating and accusing of this, accusing of that. All these insecure behaviors can happen. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're borderline personality disorder, though. Okay. They could exhibit all the traits, but it doesn't mean that they are having this disorder. What the difference between the two is very much like NPD. No clear sense of attachment, perpetual state of abandonment fear. They must get validated through supply, but what they're trying to validate is their value to the other person, and the idea, they're trying to validate that this person isn't going to leave, abandon, reject, or betray. So that's what they're trying to validate. They have a perpetual state of that. And so when they're in the disordered thinking, they can't bond with somebody else in a similar way that an NPD person can't, because the disorder prevents that oxytocin and love from happening in the same way. The oxytocin and neurochemicals happen when they feel on a high with somebody, and then it oscillates into stress and negative feelings and stressful feelings about somebody when the abandonment, rejection, or betrayal fears kick in. And then they'll oscillate between those two things throughout the entire devaluation phase of a BPD abuse relationship, until they finally, by oscillating between the two, eventually the resentment and hate for the other person becomes so big, all right, because of this abandonment rejection thing. They often create and cause people to reject or abandon them with their behavior. So it's self-fulfilling prophecy. And then they resent that other person. That resentment grows so much. And then from there, they're trying to ego protect and say, well, this person's a piece of crap anyway. That's why they're leaving me. And you'll hear these BPD people are girls will cry and say, everybody always leaves me, everyone, this, that, and the other. And so that's, but what the difference between somebody who just has insecure attachment and a lot of abandonment fears and a BPD person is clear in how they run their relationships. So when they're in a romantic relationship, they idealize a person. And then when that person doesn't match the ideal, they get resentful. And they believe that if this person, they believe almost like the person was being somehow dishonest with them because they're not matching the fantasy that they projected of that person. And so then they start that devaluation process. All right. They start to, create conflict, drama, all kinds of stuff. And all of those neurochemical emotions are based in, if they're disordered, they're just based in, trying to get the person, and then feeling that like the person is going to betray them, and then constantly trying to control and cut the person down until eventually they're so devalued that they end up exiting the relationship. And then when they exit, they usually do it in really sinister ways, like cheating and doing all, destroying property maybe, or killing somebody in family court or something. They do it in ways that because they feel hateful towards that other person, because they feel hateful towards you because they believe that you purposefully betrayed them in some way, and you could be doing everything you can to prevent those feelings, and they can't get out of it. They're just going to be here. And that's a disordered person. They cannot get out, and they won't. And again, same with treatment. If they're not aware of the problem and what they're doing and aware that they are the problem, they can't get treatment. And so most people who have this will not get treatment, but some can and will. Usually they're somewhere on the line, not so far on the spectrum where they're so far gone. Now, understand too, people with insecure, like hurt people hurt other people, okay? So people with insecure attachment, ability to attach, and insecure attachment, not just attachment styles, but they're insecure just in their attachments in general with others. They feel like they're not good enough or not valuable enough, and they feel like people are going to leave them. They're fearful of that. They can still have love and care and feelings for others. They're not idealizing then devaluing. It's not that far on the spectrum, but when they're hypersensitive though to someone else's behavior, and they're constantly trying to mitigate problems in this sense, and if that, they're constantly, and it's bringing stress and drama to a relationship, and so you have people are insecure. Insecure people can get help and can do better when they see that the problem is them, of course. And it's a lot easier for them to work on themselves than somebody who's dealing with a disorder. And the same thing, if you think you have a disorder, you need to be in therapy because your perception of the reality is not real. Okay. So that's what you have to remember. Shit, I'm at my time already. So I'm not even getting into traits. I just went over that explanation. So now I got to go. That being said, though, let's see. I will mention one thing. Let's see. What will I do here? Because I can't believe it. It's like I give an explanation, and it's like, I don't know. It always takes for frickin' ever, man. It just does. You know what I mean? But this is important stuff, though. You probably needed to hear that distinction. Oh, the other thing about abuse. Somebody had asked, so I answered this question. Somebody had asked, well, or said, like, well, they kind of they're a little bit critical, but not in a bad way, really, about me saying the word abuse is overused, right? As if I'm going to take away from victims of abuse. Like somebody's been abused, I'm taking away from that or something, like I'm not recognizing that. So I want to be clear on this. Overuse of words like abuse or like narcissism takes away from actual abuse victims or actual people who have been in these relationships with narcissistic people. Okay. When we overuse those terms, then it waters the terms down. The word abuse could mean something like, financial abuse because he was the primary person working and then they broke up. So she needed to get a job. Somehow can be construed today as financial abuse. That's not financial abuse. It's called a breakup, and then you have to get a job. Okay. That's called a consequence of a breakup. That's not abuse, but we overuse the term. And so then somebody who has a guy, where there's a family and kids, and the guy clears the accounts out, spends all the money, hides money, and then disappears, leaving her practically homeless, that would be financial abuse. And that's not the same thing as, a girl had to get a job after a breakup. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to look at the scale and not overuse these terms, because it does take away from real victims. And so I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying abuse doesn't exist or anything. It does. But unfortunately now, I have to ask more questions because people use these terms too broadly. So when someone says they were abused, I have to ask, what do you mean by that? And any therapist worth a grain of salt will ask that question, because it could mean something that you would not consider abuse at all, or it could mean something very, very serious, right? So we just need to get clarity when we look at these things and not try to use blanket terms and statement to feel like victims in this world, which is what people often tend to do nowadays, and it's not very good. I was going to go over checklist items, but I guess we're going to have to save that till next time. And so I will say, if you are in this relationship with a covert narcissist, or if you've been through this, you're going to need help. You're just going to need it, because this pollutes your ability to have future relationships. This skews your perceptions of relationships in the world. And so with that, I'm using Instagram to talk to people. And if this has happened to you, or if this is something that you're dealing with, just hit me up. Okay, I have resources for you. It could involve doing some work with me in a coaching, or it could involve just some free resources and a point in the right direction. That'll depend on you and what you actually need. But it can't hurt for us to have that conversation. Don't be on an island. Don't be by yourself. Okay, seek out support if you are in this scenario, or think you are, or if you've been through it. All right. And that's my message for the day. We'll continue with actual traits and some of those things when we return next time. All right. Thank you.